name's Jewel, and I work for Essex St Cheese, and I manage our education and marketing programs. I'm really excited to introduce you to the queen of aged Goudas within the L'amuse brand. It's called L'amuse Signature Gouda, and it's a cow's milk Gouda from the Netherlands. In a world of thousands of Goudas from countless countries, it seemed nearly impossible to narrow it down to something that could truly represent the history of this beloved cheese. But thanks to our longstanding partnership with the Julia Child of cheese herself, Betty Koster, we are honored to work with this delicious classic aged Gouda. I want to share with you some really important information today about the history of Gouda, why Betty chose to work with the producer for her signature product, and then most importantly, the techniques used in aging this cheese that make it stand out. So let's get started. Gouda cheese dates back to the 1300s in a small village in North Holland, Gouda, that was surrounded by many small boeren farms that made their own cheese using their own cows. Farmers would bring their cheeses to the town center where professionals would inspect their goods to begin negotiating its sale on the marketplace. So while Gouda was at the town, it represented an opportunity for these small farmstead producers to have a bit of variety in each recipe while receiving feedback to improve the cheese. This became even more important as the Dutch began exploring the world for their trade and needing sources of protein on their long sea journeys. Additionally, out of fear that the country might one day sink underwater, they shared their dairy culture wherever they went in case they may have to one day move there permanently. This is why there is very little protection on the Gouda recipe, and the top two producers of Gouda in the world are South Africa and New Zealand. So then, what is Gouda? While there are a few rules associated with specific producers in the Netherlands, there is no PDO like that of Comté, Manchego, or Parmigiano Reggiano. Rather, the true identity of Gouda is associated with its recipe technique, which is a result of necessity. Much of cheesemaking is a happy accident, and Gouda is a great example of that. Historically, when you made cheese in Italy, France, and Switzerland, you would heat the milk with rennet in a copper vat over fire that allows the proteins in liquid to separate to curds and whey. However, the majority of the Netherlands is below sea level, which meant limited access to copper, so they made their vats out of wood instead. If you were to place your wooden vat over a fire to heat your milk, what would happen? Well, you'd have one messy bonfire. So they developed another technique to heat the milk by flushing the vat with hot water. This also stops the acidification of the milk, meaning less lactose is converted into lactic acid and makes for a tighter curd. This results in a cheese that is denser in texture and sweeter in flavor with less animal notes. As you can see here, hot water is circulating the vat, as I mentioned, and the excess whey is running off in a drain below. While this technique was developed almost 1,000 years ago, it is still universally used today in making Gouda cheese all over the world. Well, part of the results of Dutch exploration was that they became incredibly efficient at export and meeting market demands. That is why there are so many Goudas at every cheese counter that you walk into. And the origin of adding flavor to the cheese dates back to the region of Leiden, when they would add caraway and fenugreek seeds to offset the cream that had been removed to make butter and make it more durable for living in a ship's galley. Young Gouda is enjoyed as an everyday cheese with bread and butter, or on sandwiches with ham, or melted into delicious gratin dishes. But again, are these traditional representations of Gouda available in the United States? This is what Daphne Zeppos wondered in 2008 when she traveled to Amsterdam to meet Betty Koster of Fromagerie L'amuse. Daphne packed up all the Gouda she could find in the stores into a suitcase and brought them to Betty. Betty is the equivalent of Randolph Hodgson's Neal's Yard Dairy, working closely with individual producers to provide feedback that improves a recipe and a consistent market via retail, wholesale, and export that allows for these traditional producers to continue in their practice. When the majority of milk in the Netherlands is sold as powdered milk to Asia, there's a great deal of pressure on small producers to just sell their milk to large processors and take the paycheck, especially as the younger generation opts for professional careers in the bigger cities. Betty comes in to help them compete in a largely commodity-priced market and have their stories and traditions be heard. So when Daphne showed her the suitcase full of cheese and asked, "Can we do better?" Betty replied emphatically, "You eat this? We don't even eat this here. Yes, we can do better." Betty has been working in Amsterdam as a retailer, wholesaler, and exporter since 1989, picking up the torch of her mother and grandmother's work as the first women to own cheese shops in Amsterdam. While she could find the small producers making beautiful boerenkaas or farm cheese, she struggled to find a producer that could be a classic representation of the classic house milk Gouda cheese from North Holland. Betty said that she was always looking for a cheese that she could submit to the Olympics on behalf of all the other ones. But many producers had gone the way of commodity and recipe and were no longer paying close attention to the quality of milk, until she found the Kano Cooperative on the Beemster polder. You may be familiar with Beemster as a brand of cheese, but it's actually a province in North Holland that was the first successful experiment of using dikes and windmills to reclaim land from the sea to make what is called a polder. The Beemster polder is home to the richest grass, best for making the highest quality milk, so delicious that in fact Ben & Jerry's buys their milk exclusively from this cooperative for their EU production. The Kano cooperative has been voted time and again the greenest or most eco-friendly cheese creamery in the world. While in business since the turn of the 20th century, they hold on to their role as leaders in the field of animal welfare, sustainability, and making the tastiest cheese. When you have the best grass in the world, you don't need to rely on excess salt, additives, or lab-designed starter cultures as a crutch for flavor. Finally, Betty found someone that she could believe in. But what about the age? The majority of opleggers, or affineurs, do not have the centuries-old tradition of aging cheese for long times in caves like those in Italy, France, and Switzerland do. In fact, the Dutch were the first to start applying coating to their cheeses since they needed to be able to withstand the inclement environments while being shipped around the world. Additionally, with limited land space in a small country, the investment of aging cheese for years only to lose kilos of weight in the process seemed incredibly cost-prohibitive to the Dutch entrepreneurial mindset. So the majority of Gouda in the Netherlands is aged in massive walk-in coolers, kept at just above freezing temperatures with blowing air and a paracoat over the rind. The cheeses lose only about 250 grams in 3 years and are low maintenance since there's no need to manage molds and turning the wheels that are weeping moisture. However, no microbial activity is happening in this stage, so flavor development is limited in an already handicapped cheese that is pasteurized. Betty knew that the true potential of this cheese could be harnessed if aged in the proper environment. Making cheese with the best quality milk using the best ingredients, it would be great to keep it raw so the flavors could really shine. However, being in a cooperative setting, it is better for quality and food safety to pasteurize. Not a problem though if you can drive what flavor remains out during the affinage or aging process. Betty buys her large 40-pound cheeses at 3 weeks from Kano and brings them to her own oplegger, who allows her to set the temperature and humidity to something more reminiscent of caves or Parmigiano Reggiano. Aged at 54 degrees Fahrenheit, these pasteurized cheeses are allowed to express higher notes of umami, rich hay, and deep roasted hazelnuts with a mouth-watering acidity that coats your whole palate. While I may enjoy the intense crystalline structure and bold flavors of cheeses aged the other way, those flavors are more of a wham bam thank you ma'am experience, hitting up front and leaving as quickly as they came. Also, the drier texture means more concentrated flavors and can lead to palate fatigue quickly, while Betty aims for her signature Gouda to be something you keep coming back to. Pair it with robust red wines from Bordeaux or Porto, or nutty brown ales with a creamy mouthfeel. Have it with your morning cup of coffee for a truly roasted pairing, and even go as far as to have it with dates and candied cashews for an irresistible dessert. This is the cheese that represents what the Dutch keep on hand for all such occasions. I really appreciate you taking the time to learn about our wonderful L'amuse signature Gouda. If you have any questions, please do not hesitate to reach out at racheljewel@essexcheese.com.